Hello everyone and welcome. Welcome to this webinar to launch the International Energy Agency's new Energy Efficiency 2025 report. I'm Jethro Mullen, head of the IEA's communications team, and I'm joined today by Dr. Brian Motherway, the head of the Office of Energy Efficiency and Inclusive Transitions, and by the lead author of the report, Lucas Böhler. So during today's event, Brian will make some opening remarks, and then Lucas will present the key findings of the report, and we'll then take questions from those of you taking part in the Zoom webinar. And for those participants, we invite you to send your questions through the Q&A function of the Zoom at any point during the presentation. We'll also take a short break right after the presentation to give you a chance to send your questions. And with that, I'll hand over to our head of Energy Efficiency and Inclusive Transitions, Dr. Brian Motherway.
Thank you, Jethro. And again, thank you everyone for joining us today and welcome to this webinar to launch Energy Efficiency 2025. Across the world, energy policymakers face challenges to address key imperatives ranging from energy security, affordability, to energy access, competitiveness, and of course, climate change. Policymakers make different choices as to how to balance these issues and to improve the lives of their citizens. But one tool that is widely recognized as being able to contribute to a range of these goals is, of course, energy efficiency. And IEA analysis clearly shows that energy efficiency has already made substantial positive gains to bringing greater levels of energy security, more affordable energy bills, improved competitiveness, and of course, lower emissions. And it has huge potential to further enhance people's lives and livelihoods. Governments are recognizing this, and as we track policy making across the world, we can see a clear step up in government action and policy making on energy efficiency this year. This is bolstered, of course, by key pressures relating to energy security, energy costs for families and businesses, and other pressures. And it is also, of course, in response to the historic commitment made at COP28 just 2 years ago by governments agreeing to work together to double annual energy efficiency progress by 2030. And this step up in policy action is starting to bear fruit. As you will see in our new report that Lucas will show you shortly, we see a clear improvement in energy efficiency progress in 2025. And of course, this is to be welcomed. At the same time, progress remains well behind the ambition of the doubling goal, and it's particularly timely that today, as discussions continue at COP30 in Brazil, we are reporting to you that energy efficiency is not yet on track for the target that governments set for themselves just 2 years ago at COP28. And our report examines in detail what are the reasons for this, looking at the dynamics of the global energy system where demand is growing most strongly, where policies are having the greatest impact, and where maybe more policy action can really help if we do want to accelerate progress in energy efficiency. The kind of actions that government can take, learning from each other, from policies that are succeeding, from areas that need strengthening for countries if they want to bring the benefits of energy efficiency to their citizens and to get back on track for their targets. Just last week, the IEA published its World Energy Outlook, and it pointed to a world thirsty for energy, with growing demand, particularly in electricity, driven by data centers, AI, cooling, and an overall shift towards electricity-driven economies. And the World Energy Outlook also highlighted the range of challenges and uncertainties that policymakers and citizens face. In this context, energy efficiency is not something abstract or remote. Efficient air conditioners can make sure that people can afford to keep themselves cool during hot weather and heat waves, something of growing need for many people around the world. Well-insulated buildings mean, in reality, that families are living in more comfortable and healthy and more affordable homes. And energy efficiency is both creating millions of jobs in construction, services and industry, and also protecting those jobs by making those industries more competitive and keeping their energy costs down. And so to tell us exactly what the latest trends are and why these issues matter, let me turn now to our lead analyst, Lucas Böhler. Lucas, please.
Thank you very much, Brian, and thank you also on my behalf, everyone, for tuning in to this webinar where we explore some of the recent trends in energy efficiency progress globally. And in the past few years, we've seen quite some turmoil in global energy markets, and this also had its impact on energy efficiency progress globally. The main indicator used for energy efficiency globally is energy intensity, which means that if we use less energy to produce the same amount of economic output, the world as a whole is becoming more efficient. When we look back a few years in terms of energy efficiency progress globally, starting with 2020 and 2021 during the COVID-19 pandemic, we see that global energy efficiency progress was relatively slow those years, below 1% each of those years. Then in 2022, partly driven by the effects of the global energy crisis, of course high prices in many regions, we see global efficiency progress making a jump to above 2% in 2022. When we then turn to the years after 2022, we see global efficiency progress fall back somewhat again to around 1% in 2024. Today, we have some good news to report to you on efficiency progress in 2025. Because our latest data shows that in 2025, we expect global energy efficiency progress to show an uptick to 1.8% this year. So a real improvement from the progress last year in 2024. If we then compare progress in 2025 with the longer-term global average since 2019, we again see this as a real uptick in 2025. Average progress since 2019 was around 1.3% per year globally, and as said, in 2025, we see this jump to 1.8%. In the report, we also specifically look at what regions have driven this uptick in global progress in 2025. If we look at key markets in Asia, in China, India, Southeast Asia, we see that their average progress this decade was below 2%, which has caused the world as a whole to be at 1.3% this decade. However, if we then turn to 2025 specifically, we see that progress in China is expected to double, and in India and Southeast Asia, even to almost triple in terms of energy efficiency progress in 2025. These trends have pushed up the global number, leaving the world at 1.8% progress in 2025, while some other regions have seen more muted progress in 2025. Policy is an important driver of energy efficiency progress. And in 2025, we've also seen strong policy action in many areas in many different countries over the world. In fact, in 2025 alone, we've seen over 250 new or updated energy efficiency-related policies announced in a range of different sectors. For example, in transport, we've seen electric vehicle subsidies, but also more stringent fuel economy standards. In the industry sector, we've seen policies to promote the uptake of energy management, but also promote more efficient industrial motors. And in the building sector, of course, we've seen targeted incentives for retrofits, but also more stringent building energy codes. And all of these policies are contributing to stronger efficiency progress. So, 2025 shows a real improvement in energy efficiency progress. However, as we all know, for energy efficiency trends, it's also important to look at a longer-term horizon. And when we look at a longer-term average for energy efficiency, we see a more mixed picture. In the beginning of this century, the first decade, from 2000 to 2009, we see global efficiency progress at around 1% per year on average. Then, in the next decades, from 2010 to 2019, we see progress jump to over 2%. Since then, as mentioned before, global efficiency progress has fallen back somewhat to around 1.3% per year this decade. This is well below the target that governments agreed at COP28 in Dubai 2 years ago, where they set a target of doubling global energy efficiency improvements by 2030 to around 4% per year. As a result, the data today shows that the world remains off track at the moment to reach this global ambition in 2030. In the report, we also explore several key trends that help explain why progress is not faster. And the first of those has to do that we see changes as to where energy demand growth is happening in recent years. When we look at the period 2010 to 2019, we see that energy demand growth is split roughly evenly between the three key end-use sectors: industry, buildings, and transport, roughly all accounting for 1/3 of growth in global energy demand. If we then turn to our more recent period, since 2019, we see that this picture changes quite significantly. First of all, in the buildings and transport sector, we see lower energy demand growth this decade on average. Here we can really see the effect of policy taking place as well, with more efficient buildings, but also, as mentioned, the uptake of electric vehicles accelerating. And these factors, combined with structural effects, have pushed down some of this energy demand growth in transport and buildings. The picture is different for industry, as we can see. Industry has been responsible for around 2/3 of global energy demand growth since 2019. And this is particularly relevant because at the same time, we have seen that efficiency progress in the industrial sector has actually fallen in recent years, from around 2% last decade to below 0.5% this decade. This is driven by a combination of trends. We've seen a shift towards more energy-intensive industry, for example, but also we've seen less of a policy focus in recent years in industry. For example, out of the 250 new policy announcements that I mentioned for 2025 just a moment ago, just over 35 of those were specifically targeted at the industrial sector. Next to changes to where energy demand is growing, we've also seen that policy in recent years has lagged behind technological progress. When we look at key end-use technologies such as lighting, air conditioners, passenger cars and motors, we see that the average policy level has increased somewhat over the past 15 years. However, when we compare that to the rate at which technology for these end-use technologies has improved in terms of efficiency, we see that this is much, much faster. As a result of that, the gap between policy and technology has increased over recent years. Now, that's not necessarily a problem if we all buy the most efficient available technologies. However, our data shows that in reality, we don't. When we compare the average product sold in key markets in terms of its efficiency, we see that this level is closer to the minimum, the bottom requirement that policy sets, rather than the technological potential in many cases. As I said, this gap is growing, so there are significant savings being left on the table at the moment. Significant savings both in terms of energy savings, as efficient products use less energy, but also in terms of cost savings. Because first of all, efficient products use less energy, so lowers energy bills for people at home. But secondly, and that's another key finding in the report, we see that efficient products don't necessarily have to cost more to purchase than inefficient products. If we take the case of air conditioners, for example, we see that in many key growth markets at the moment, it is possible to purchase an air conditioning that is twice as efficient as another one for roughly the same purchase price. Air conditioners are a particularly important area to highlight here, because we also see in recent years a strong rise in cooling demand. If we compare air conditioner ownership for different regions around the world, we see that in 2010, the United States and Japan, for example, already had high ownership rates of air conditioners, while the European Union, Korea, China, and India saw lower ownership rates of air conditioners too. If we compare that then to 2024, 14 years later, we see that in many of these countries, air conditioner ownerships have increased a lot, even doubled or tripled in some cases. This is, of course, a very positive trend, as access to air conditioners is very much needed in many regions, given extreme temperatures and can sometimes even be life-saving. However, because many of these air conditioners are not the most efficient models yet, we also see at the same time this is leading to strong cooling-related electricity demand growth in many of these regions. If these air conditioners had been more efficient, people would have saved more money with the same level of comfort and less pressures on energy demand growth. Governments have the opportunity to accelerate energy efficiency progress with policy. In the report, we identified 2 concrete ways in which governments can ramp up policy action. First, there remain important policy gaps to be filled. If we look, for example, at new buildings or industrial motors, we see that around 40% of their energy use globally is not yet covered by any form of energy efficiency standard. However, even if the policies are in place, this is not necessarily always enough. To move the market, as we've seen before, policies need to be ambitious and regularly updated. If we take the example of lighting, for example, we see that the average policy level has indeed increased over the past 15 years. However, we also analyze then how does this differ from country to country? And when we add that layer, we see that there's still a very wide range between policy ambition between countries. As a matter of fact, right now there are policies in place that are less ambitious than the average policy standard was in terms of efficiency 15 years ago. Furthermore, we also see that the average policy level remains well below the technological potential, showing there is a lot of potential to improve efficiency progress further. In the report, we show that this is not only the case for lighting, but also for air conditioners, motors, and passenger cars. To help policymakers accelerate progress on energy efficiency, here at the IEA we have developed an energy efficiency policy toolkit, where there are many case studies and examples of policies that have worked and have been effective in countries in the past that others can access for free on the IEA website. In parallel with today's launch, we have updated this policy toolkit and added many more case studies, so we highly recommend you to check that out on the IEA website for free as well. Last then, if you want more information on the Energy Efficiency 2025 report, this is also, of course, freely available on the IEA website. And next to that, we have also updated our Energy Efficiency Progress Tracker. This Progress Tracker contains much of the data behind the report, which you can access for free, but there's even an extra layer where you can explore data for a specific region or country or indicator that you might be interested in. So we highly recommend you to check that out as well.
Thank you very much, Lucas. And so, as Lucas has set out, there's a lot of really interesting information in this year's Energy Efficiency 2025 report, and we do encourage you to go and access all these free resources online and engage with us. We're very keen to hear your questions and work with you on these important issues. And I did want to mention finally that the cover photo on this year's Energy Efficiency report is called A Window to the World, taken by Merit Quinn Shal, who is the winner of the IEA's first ever competition for young photographers shining a light on energy efficiency. And the photo actually depicts the traditional building practices in Morocco, where various features have been installed over centuries to make the building cooler, more comfortable and more affordable in energy terms, reminding us that these issues have been imperative to our societies for a very long time, but also that the solutions have been available for a very long time. So thank you very much for your attention. Thank you, Jethro.
Thank you, Brian and Lucas, for the presentation. And we now have time to take some questions. We invite the participants in attendance to send your questions through the Q&A function of the Zoom if you haven't done so already. And I understand there's a lot of people also following the webinar on YouTube. If you do have questions there, feel free to put the questions in the comments section on YouTube, and we'll do our best to track those as well. And we'll just give you, we'll just take a 2-minute break to give everyone a chance to send in some questions, and we'll be right back. Thank you. Hello and welcome back. Thank you very much for your questions. We're going to go through as many of them as we can in the time we have. So to start with, we have one from Janadahana Anjanappa, who asks, how do we go about improving energy efficiency financing for buildings and industry? Do you have any benchmark practices? There's also a question on the COP28 target that I think was mentioned by Brian and Lucas, and obviously is something of a live topic given that COP30 is taking place now in Belém. That question is, given that we are off track, is it still possible to meet the COP28 target by 2030? So I guess in the next 5 years. And that's the doubling of energy efficiency target. And then also a question on affordability. People are facing affordability challenges. How can we ask them to fork out the sums needed to buy more efficient technologies? So perhaps we can divide the questions up amongst you. Perhaps on the sort of the bigger picture one on COP28. It's COP30 happening now. COP28 is the target that was set. Is it still achievable?
Thanks for that question, and it is very pertinent and extremely timely that they're literally discussing these matters in Belém today. COP28, the target for energy efficiency, was really important to remind us how energy efficiency plays its central role in delivering our climate targets, and we certainly tracked an increase in policy responses afterwards as governments took that target very seriously and continue to take it seriously and work towards it. Is it possible to achieve? Yes, of course it's possible to achieve. Will it take more effort? Yes. We're not on track. Policy makers would need to step up. Industry would need to step up. We would need a lot of action. But certainly our analysis shows that the doubling target, which came from our analysis showing that 4% a year improvement in energy efficiency, double the baseline, is not only desirable but entirely possible. And in fact, most countries have achieved those rates at different times in the past. What we haven't seen is a consistent delivery by the world as a whole of that target. And the report sets out some of the policy-making actions that will help achieve that. What's also important, though, that I think particularly what we're seeing in our policy tracking this year is that energy efficiency policy making is being made certainly in the context of climate and the COP target, but in many other contexts as well. And as Lucas has shown, and you can find in more detail in the report, there are many instances this year where energy efficiency policies are being put in place specifically to address questions such as affordability, energy security, industrial competitiveness. So we see a growing recognition that, as well as the climate context, that energy efficiency plays a really important role in delivering not just energy goals, but wider economic goals as well. And in fact, of the 120 or so nationally determined contribution climate plans that have been submitted so far to this year's COP process, 120 countries have submitted their new plans, and over 100 make reference to energy efficiency, and many set specific energy efficiency targets as part of their climate plans, as well as the wider context of using energy efficiency as an economic and developmental tool, which is to be encouraged as well.
Thanks, Brian. And then, Lucas, I think there was the question on best practices for financing efficiency in buildings and industry, and then also the affordability question. I guess there's some interconnections there as well.
I'll try to take both at the same time. Thank you very much, Jethro. First of all, on the buildings and industry finance and the benchmarking of these policies, this is an excellent question. And that's exactly what the report and the policy toolkit that I outlined are meant for. So in the report, we have a section on investment, which includes the numbers on investment in buildings and in industry. But one particular thing that might be interesting to highlight is that we also outline in the report the different policies that governments have implemented to try to accelerate that investment in industrial energy efficiency. So I highly recommend you to check that out as well. On the policy toolkit side of things, then, there is specific information on financing instruments. Policies that governments have put in place in buildings, industry, but also in transport even, to promote energy efficiency in recent years, and that we think work. So we highly recommend you to look at the website, and there are these benchmarks of policies that are sort of best practices in this area. Then secondly, perhaps on the affordability question, I think a very important topic on top of people's minds at home, of course. Everyone has an energy bill and has seen that go up in some places. And the good news, I guess, is that energy efficiency can lower these energy bills. And that we show in the report that it has an effect on energy bills. More insulated buildings mean less energy cost, more efficient air conditioners mean less cooling cost. So energy efficiency has the opportunity to lower these energy bills. And particularly in 2025, we see that governments have put a focus on addressing affordability using energy efficiency. So there are targeted policies implemented in many countries around the world this year that specifically use energy efficiency to target specific groups that have energy affordability issues. So a very important topic that we'll continue working on here at the IEA, also in the context of energy efficiency.
Thanks a lot, Lucas. I think we have time just for maybe a couple more questions, if that's okay. One of them coming through YouTube from Zanata, and apologies on my pronunciation, Zanata Merzakulova, who's asking, how is energy efficiency of data centers being assessed? I don't know if there's any indications you can give there. I know this is an evolving topic for the IEA as a whole, and for the efficiency team, but also a very important one. And then also a question referring to the COP28 pledges again. Obviously, there's the tripling of global renewable capacity and the doubling of energy efficiency progress. And the renewables target seems to have gotten more attention, more coverage in the press. How can we get more of a spotlight on efficiency, which is also an important part? Why is it sometimes overlooked, even though it seems to be a low-hanging fruit? So, Lucas, maybe to you, if there's anything to say on data center efficiency and what's happening there, and then Brian on the visibility of efficiency and the goals that have been set.
Yeah, thank you very much, Jethro, and thank you for the question, of course, people at home. I think we see that there is strong electricity demand growth in data centers in many regions, but the energy used in data centers is, of course, used for many different applications. But what I would like to highlight here is specifically artificial intelligence. We see that artificial intelligence uses energy, but there's also a lot of potential to apply artificial intelligence to save energy. We've seen cases, for example, in advanced energy management this year, where applications of AI have really enabled firms to use these algorithms to save more energy. So that can also be very positive. However, it is true that, like space cooling, data centers is an area where we see strong electricity demand growth and where efficiency remains very relevant.
Thanks a lot. And Brian, any thoughts on visibility and?
I think it's a very good question, and thank you for it. And it's a very common issue for these debates on energy policy and energy efficiency, that I think it probably is fair to say that energy efficiency doesn't always get the same level of attention or focus that maybe certainly we working in it would see as merited in terms of the contributions it can make, not just to climate goals, but to wider social and economic goals. And I think there are reasons for that, relating to it being a more diffuse issue, cutting across the different sectors, from buildings and industry to transport to people's behaviour, requiring a consequential range of policy responses that are often more complex to implement, to govern. And you know, policy implementation and design really matters. I think, as Lucas has shown really well, I think an important finding for me looking at this year's report is many places where policies exist on paper, maybe they're not delivering in practice because they haven't been updated, they're not being well implemented, and I think that needs a stronger focus. I think what gives me, cause for optimism is we are starting to see what I would think of as a more tangible understanding of the benefits energy efficiency can bring. This is not something abstract. This is not just about, numbers counted in the cloud, but it's about where energy efficiency can make people's daily lives better. It can enhance energy security. It can make buildings more affordable to live in. And of course, it can protect jobs in industry. And I think the more governments recognize that wider context for energy efficiency, the more they will be able to focus on it and use it as an important positive tool.
Thanks a lot, Brian. And I think on maybe just a couple of things from me to add, just as context, if helpful, on data centers and AI. Obviously, the IEA did publish a special report on energy and AI earlier this year, which I encourage people to go and read on the website if they haven't already. And that's complemented by a Energy and AI and Data Center Observatory, looking at the latest plans and developments in that space. So it is something that the IEA is following very closely, and I'm sure more work and analysis coming on it soon, and including a commentary we published just this week about data centers in Europe. So it's a great topic and a developing one. And I guess, you know, on the visibility of energy efficiency, I don't think many people do more than you do, Brian, and the IEA to highlight the importance of efficiency and also the Global Energy Efficiency Conference, which we hold every year, that really, you know, puts the issue in the spotlight and brings different stakeholders together, governments, industry, civil society, and the next one obviously taking place in Canada next year with the with the Minister. I don't know if you wanted to...
Well, we're very pleased that we have been running these annual global conferences, thank you, Jethro, for 10 years now. Probably the only really global ministerial level conference on energy efficiency. Our 10th just happened recently in Brussels. It was our largest ever, over 100 countries participating from right around the world. And next year, we're very pleased to say that the Canadian government and the Energy Minister of Canada has agreed to co-host the conference alongside our Executive Director, Dr. Fatih Birol. And so in late June, we'll be converging on Montreal for the 11th annual global conference, and that's certainly a moment where the spotlight will be firmly on energy efficiency.
Great. I think that's a good note to end on, and I think we've covered the main questions that came in. So thank you to everyone for following this webinar. Thank you for the questions. If any journalists who are following have questions, further questions, we invite you to reach out to our press office, and we'll get back to you as soon as we can. And for other participants, we'd encourage you to reach out to your contact points at the IEA, and I'm sure there's, you know, they can help with any follow-up questions. Thanks again to Brian and Lucas. Thank you to everyone following online for the interest in our work. Just a last reminder that the full Energy Efficiency 2025 report is available for free on our website, along with a data explorer that enables you to dig further into the numbers. So do please take a look. Thank you and goodbye.